Guten Tag, WAP. This is Mr. Liniger. Let's make history today as we go over Unit 4, Day 17. Today we're going to talk about India and a little bit about the Middle East during the post-modern period, the contemporary period, after World War II. But let's get started with our daily punishment. I now sleep in the fireplace. I now sleep like a log. Your key terms: Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Gamal Nasir, the Six Days War, the Yom Kippur War, Pan-Arabism, and Bollywood. Today we're going to go over decolonization and politics in South Asia and the Middle East. So let's get started. Mohandas Gandhi was a Hindu mystic. He was one of the founders of the Indian National Congress. He's going to lead the Indian independence movement after people turn away from more violent people like B.G. Talak. He is going to use nonviolent civil disobedience during this time period. One of the methods we talked about before was like how he did the boycott of the cotton textiles. He did the Salt March. He starts the civil disobedience in 1930. During World War II, many Indians were sympathetic with Japan. Gandhi is going to pursue a policy of peaceful non-cooperation. After World War II, the British are finally willing to consider independence and giving India independence. This is especially true because the Labour government is now in charge, which is a little bit more sympathetic towards the Indians. India will be partitioned. Remember, there were Muslims in India that wanted independence. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, but they wanted to have their own independent country because they were worried about being part of a majority Hindu country. So India will be broken up into India and Pakistan. Pakistan will be Muslim, India will be Hindu. 10 million refugees will move to either India or Pakistan. 1 million will die in the migration. Some of the Hindu extremists thought Gandhi was too tolerant and sympathetic towards the Muslims. So Gandhi himself will be assassinated on January 1948 by a Hindu extremist. There will be conflict between India and Pakistan over one of the border regions that they both claimed, the Kashmir region. Pakistan will lost, and there's hatred and tension between Pakistan and India ever since. Let's talk about South Asia since 1945. The first Indian Prime Minister was Jawaharlal Nehru. He was Gandhi's friend. He's going to become the Prime Minister of India. His foreign policy is going to be the third path, non-alignment. He didn't want to get involved in the Cold War. He has some of the nations from Africa and Asia meet in the Bandung Conference, where they come up with a policy of neutrality during the Cold War, which does not make America happy. India is going to become a stable democracy during this time. They were a federal parliamentary democracy similar to Canada and Australia. In Pakistan, their president will be Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He was the president of the All-Muslim League. Originally, Pakistan included East and Western Bangladesh, but they will break off. Bangladesh will break off and become their own country in 1972. Pakistan was a centralized state. It was influenced by the military. It's often unable to control tribes in the mountains. It increasingly became under the influence of Islamic fundamentalists. And even though it was a U.S. ally, there was a big terrorist sector in Pakistan. For example, Pakistan was where Osama bin Laden was hiding. That's where he was killed by the U.S. Army. Let's talk about India after World War II. India is going to begin to develop a strong industrial base, strong infrastructure. They're going to possess a larger middle class than any other Asian or African post-colonial nation. As mentioned before, Nehru was the first president. He will welcome foreign investment and capitalism. Both industrial and agricultural productivity will expand. The Green Revolution is going to happen to a large extent in India. India will have a major high-tech sector. They'll have their own version of Silicon Valley, where there'll be a lot of technology, computer products, electronics in India. Indira Gandhi was the first woman to lead India. She was the prime minister from 1966 to 1977 and 1980 to 1984. She will oversee the Green Revolution, an aggressive foreign policy, wars with Pakistan, and getting atomic nuclear bombs for India. She will be assassinated by her own bodyguards in 1984. She was the daughter of Nehru. Some of the realities of India. India is a very successful post-colonial nation. They have a middle class. Unlike some of these other uh, nations that get independence, India maintained a democracy, but there are some problems with India. Nehru's family, through Indira Gandhi and grandsons, have dominated Indian politics. Even though there are a democracy, their family are usually the ones that are elected president. India has also suffered from massive population growth and limited resources, so there's a huge disconnect between the poor and the rich. Also, Hindu fundamentalism has become a bigger deal in India recently, where they've done persecutions against the Sikhs and the Muslims that still live in India. As far as pop culture goes, there is a entertainment industry in India called Bollywood. It's Hindi cinema. It's the world's largest film industry. It has led to an increase in nationalism and Hindi themes. It's led to changing cultural stereotypes outside of India, and it's their biggest film producer. Dun dun dun. Let's talk about Egypt. Gamal Nasser is going to take power after a military coup in 1952. By 1954, he's going to eliminate all political parties. Remember, after World War II, Egypt officially got independence. Britain kind of got rid of Egypt. They kind of let them go their own way after World War I. Nasser is going to redistribute land to the peasants, free education. He'll subsidize food prices to try to create jobs. He'll limit foreign investment. He'll nationalize some foreign properties. In 1956, he's going to force the British to leave the Suez Canal, which will upset the British because they helped build it. Because of this, the British are going to try to attack Egypt, the Canal Zone, with the French and the Israelites. The only reason the British pull out is America actually joins forces with Russia, and they condemn the British. For foreign policy, for Nasser is going to have an aggressive foreign policy, which will drain the money from the country. It'll raise suspicions that he's allied with Russia, and he's going to basically, his whole foreign policy is he wants to destroy Israel. He thinks Israel is an illegitimate nation. We'll talk about Israel in a second. He thinks that the Jews have stolen the land from the Palestinians, and he wants to unite the Arab countries to try to destroy Israel. The idea of trying to unite the Arab countries is called Pan-Arabism, and it will not be successful. He goes to a couple major wars against Israel, and Egypt loses. After Nasser, Anwar Sadat is going to slowly dismantle most of the government schemes. He's going to get rid of some of the socialist aspects in Egypt. He's going to seek a more profitable relationship with the West, and he will end the war with Israel. And Sadat will actually make peace with Israel in the Camp David Accords. And he will be assassinated by that. He'll be assassinated for that by a Muslim extremist. Let's talk about Southwest Asia, the Middle East, since 1945. Arab states are going to gain independence during and after World War II. In 1947, Israel will be created. They're finally going to honor the Balfour Declaration. The British will withdraw. There'll be a civil war that will break out. The Jews will proclaim the state of Israel. This will upset a lot of the Arabs in the country because they feel like their land was just stolen from them. The people that lived in Palestine were Arabs. Jews had a historical tie to the land from the Bible, but from an Arab perspective, like their land was being taken from them. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq declared war on Israel in 1947. This was called the 1947 to 49 Palestinian War. Even though basically all of the Middle East declares war against Israel, Israel will achieve victory. America and some of the Western nations will help supply and support Israel with weapons. Israel will then take more land than they originally granted. This will increase Pan-Arabism and hatred for Israel. Let's talk a little bit more about the conflicts between Israel and Arab countries. As mentioned before, in 1947, Israel will be partitioned, Arabs will invade, In 1956, Israel will invade the Sinai region, which was not originally given to them by the United Nations. In 1967, there'll be the Six-Day War. Egypt was planning to invade and attack Israel. Israel realized this, so Israel is going to launch a preemptive attack where their air force annihilates the Arab armies and their own air force. And Israel basically defeats all the Arab armies in 6 days. Around this time, an organization will be formed, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. One of the reasons this happened was there were 100,000 Palestinians that were displaced from 1947 to 1967 who had their land taken away. The PLO's goal was to destroy Israel, and to create an Arab state in Palestine. They are a terrorist organization. They're going to use terrorism, bombing, killing of civilians to try to justify their ends. In 1973, there was another war. Egypt is going to invade Israel in the Yom Kippur War. At this time, Israel was almost destroyed. The only reason Israel survives is America starts shipping them weapons, and this prevents Israel from winning. By this point, the Arabs are furious at America for always getting involved and always supporting Israel. So there was an organization made up of Arab countries called OPEC. These are all oil-producing countries, and they're going to do an oil embargo on America where they won't sell oil to America. This is going to cause huge inflation in America. It's called it's in the 1970s. It's called the period of stagflation. As a result of this, America is going to have gas lines. People will have to wait in line to get gas. There won't be gas for some days. You might only be able to get gas on some days of the week. And gas prices will go up as much as 30%. Also, as a result of this, there'll be increased tension between America and Arab countries. In 1979, America under Jimmy Carter will broker the Camp David Accords, which will end hostility between Egypt and Israel, and will give they'll sign a peace agreement between them. Egypt was the first country to recognize Israel as a country. Later on, Jordan, Lebanon, and Morocco will agree in principle to the Camp David Accords through the 1990s. There still are some issues that are left unresolved with Israel. The security status, the status of the Golan Heights, Jerusalem. Israel has built a wall in the West Bank, which has separated the Palestinians and the Israelites, which makes the Israelites furious. It also kind of violates international law. They do this because they said it prevents terrorism. There's a whole thing that what happens is something sets off a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. The Palestinians do a terrorist attack, and then Israel launches rockets, which inevitably kills civilians. So there's still a lot of issues left unresolved, and we have not gotten closer to a solution between Israel and Palestine specifically. There has been no two-state solution yet. The Palestinians want their own country, and the Israelites are saying that they are protecting themselves. This shows some of the progression of the wars. All right, guys, that's all I have for you for today. Until next time, deuces. Deuces, deuces.